So Nendo does trends. This is what we do for a living. So our job is to see what's happening. I might not have time to talk about Ngulusumu, Twitter, right? Of people who consider themselves perhaps a little less. What is the proper way to call that? They feel that in the looks department there's some challenges, and they sort of are coming around with a camaraderie around that. So that's just one of the sort of like small Twitter micro trends, down to one I'll show you now, which since 2018 has been a big way we advise clients. And then throughout the deck, I'll share with you some signals that could go either way. They could be a passing cloud in a moment, or they could become something that sticks around permanently. The best example of this from Nendo, I probably show this every year. Hopefully said Shiro and the team are not tired of me showing it. But this is how Kenyans spend their bundles, their time and attention. It's 5 things, and none of them, or most of them, don't have to do with your brand. People don't wake up seeking to learn about your brand as an organization, but they do want to follow creators. They do want stories and content and lifestyle will fit in there. So Google search, we search for a lot of things, but this is big. Generally our compass of guiding us to different parts of the internet. Sports betting. We're probably or possibly sitting on a public health crisis, I think, with that. Just the levels to which sports betting and games of chance and gambling and gaming in general is such a part of our culture. This week I heard some data that Kenyans will wager an average of 10 million shillings an hour on gaming platforms. And that's probably on the lower side, depending on how you ask after that. And it's tens of millions of Kenyans doing this, from retirees on radio stations sending in an SMS to people who are watching, Arsenal versus Man U. Arsenal, hoy. All right, okay. So, okay, guys, even you guys, I'll set a table for you aside at lunch. But yes, in the spirit of it, just saying sports is a very, very big pastime. Social, I'll talk about TikTok shortly. Adult content, no one ever wants to stop by this part of the 5 S's, but it's a big part of where people spend their time online. And there's more we can say about it, not in a judgy way, but just in, especially for, adults, that people are seeking out adult entertainment. And there's quite a lot to actually say, more than one might expect. And then stories. So this is your content, your news, your gossip, everything else. So this is one that went from like a trend, hey, we think this is like true, to where it's like, it's tried, tested, and true according to Nendo now. And we validated it across, I think it's over 40 countries across Africa, especially where mobile money is big, sports betting becomes a massive thing. But I mentioned Gen Z, so let's take our time and attention back there. There's some data from Odipo Dev, who I love to quote, especially here with some work they did with Africa Uncensored. So Gen Z, that would be, let's just say people up to the age of 29. Should be 20, well, it was 29 last year. I'll figure this one out, but let's just say 29 for now. So majority of them say being an influencer is a real job. Right? So these are people who are comfortable with the front-facing part of the camera, with video first, and we'll talk a bit more about that. And then they believe that they can make a lot of money by being content creators or influencers. So as we talk about influence, we have a captive audience, and particularly a generational shift that's happened there. In fact, when we look at the dream job, and this data is not from, it's from April last year, so it was before the Gen Z protests, but number one employment desire among Kenyans is being self-employed or being in business for yourself. Tied for second with doctor is being an influencer or content creator. So people know that I'm a lawyer and a content creator, right? I studied actuarial science and I'm a content creator. Why? Because the number of graduates that we're shipping every year and the number of jobs and places to absorb them, there's a big mismatch there. So what this data tells us is that people recognize that might be the way I get off the block, so to speak, and it might just become a passive income or a side hustle, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But it's interesting just where it sits, right? It's above engineer, it's above lawyer, it's above just every other one of these roles, including having an office job or being a farmer, right? So just the place of TikTok in particular, what I find fascinating is how closely linked it is to influence. In fact, well, I guess I'll talk about that just now. But the second one, Three things Gen Z are looking for from last year is, number one, is the money right? Two is their mental health okay? And three is vibes. Yeah, vibes. The vibes ain't right. You guys might have seen there's even someone who went to visit the Ministry of Lands. Do you see this video online? Looking for an internship. We're talking cold call, walk right through the door and making content as they did it. And we're like, yeah, the vibes just ain't right. And I say that not like to make fun, but like that is a real material thing of just evaluating a place besides the money and the mental health part. So you see that now, and we still have some generational questions, conflicts, areas where we agree or disagree between certainly millennials and Gen Z in the workplace today. Not to make you feel too old, but these platforms, they've been around a while. Okay, so Mom Book, also known as Facebook, is 21 years old, right? That's the legal drinking age in America. That's how long it's been around. X, was X 2 years old? Is it 19 years old? Hard to say. Instagram 15, Snapchat 14. Snapchat's also a bit underrated here, especially for sort of teen, somewhat going into the early to mid 20s. It still has a particular sway with them. And then TikTok is 8. But what's fascinating to me, according to the data we've seen from Nendo, is this might be the year, and I never thought I'd say this or next year might be the year where TikTok becomes bigger than Facebook. And I think Facebook is still one of the data sources everyone is quoting from January, which is Data Reportal. I disagree. That's the thing with stats. Everyone can have stats, but it's how you interpret them. I disagree with their stat on Facebook. I think Facebook is actually 2 million users higher than, so I'd say Facebook is at 17 million. And then TikTok now is at 15, depending on who you ask. And we calculated it some time back as Nendo between October and December of 2024. Kenyans uploaded an average of 1.3 million TikToks a day. So it's in its own sort of stratosphere right now. And it's the rules that apply there are so different. And of course, every other platform has sought to copy them. They all have vertical video, as we know now. So to the clients, I want to just ask you to just, park up in your chair a bit, have some, hopefully, bad news with a good ending. So when we hear clients say, I don't know that creator, let's say to an agency, get them off, the list of people I want to contract, or they say, you know what, I'm just not feeling this creative. I don't think it'll work with our target audience. One of my favorite quotes is by this marketing professor. Some of you might know him. His name is Mark Ritson. He cusses like a sailor and is smart as nails. And so one of the things he says is, my favorite way to politely poke at clients is that the great catch of marketing is that the minute you started getting paid to work for the brand, the company, the product, the service that you work for, it's impossible. From that the day you walk in and you have an email address for that company, you will never be able to see the product the way the customer sees it. And clients go like, no, Mark, you don't understand. And I'm like, you know what? All right. See, we're getting defensive. That's part of what it means, is that it's because you have feelings like that, it becomes very hard to be objective. But if you accept this truth, right, there's hope, right? If you accept that, which he calls the first law of marketing, and you agree you'll never see the product the same way as the customer, that's actually freeing. It frees you up to pursue data, information, research. It frees you up to try to be more objective than taking the sort of overconfidence that you can be objective, which is one of the challenges that we find, even with something like influencer marketing, to be more specific. So I think that's sort of, I guess the preamble. I think if we get into this talk, which for me is from mindsets to metrics, and really just trying to think of what's working for influencer marketing now. I'll talk a little bit about the brand side, and then I'll focus a bit more on creators as we go, and try to share, hopefully, even a couple points. There's a question that said was asked in the last session, and I added that slide. Wink, wink, Shiro. So just a few more minutes just for that, because it was one of the questions on Slido. So it should be said, I'm still surprised how many organizations aren't living in this reality, this aspect of organic. Organic doesn't work the way it did a decade ago, right? If you're posting something, expecting people to see it, I don't know how to tell you, but those years were, we've been like we're 9 years too late for that, right? Ever since each one of us has a dollar and cent sign on top of our heads for these publicly traded companies, they've torpedoed all possible organic reach in favor of whatever works and helps them compete for more time and attention. So what that means is that they've all become versions of TikTok, or they've become TikTokified. So there's lots of vertical video, lots of auto-scrolling at the expense of anything organic that a brand is posting. But that should be encouraging and freeing for us to say, okay, then must we say good morning on Mondays, right? And must we do our Throwback Thursday on Thursdays? We had a video at Nendo in 2017 called Is Influencer Marketing Broken? And it's a challenge we stand with. We have clients who've, sort of professionally bet us on this, and we've never lost this bet. We can cut a brand's content calendar in half and lose next to nothing, actually, right? So we can say a lot less than we say. And frankly, we can now take time to say meaningful things. We can take time to experiment more with video or GIFs or AI, which is, today's not the day to talk about AI, but there's this carousel we're sort of on where we're almost doing this never-ending run. And so for people who have, say, 10,000 or 100,000 or even 1 million likes or followers wherever you are going to be getting the bottom of the barrel for organic reach. So you do have to pay to play. But you're like, but Mark, I worked for a decade, to build up an audience of 3+ million. Doesn't matter. It's just a sticker, right, that's there to give you hope, confidence, and encouragement that people at one point, pressed that thumbs up or the like button, but it does not matter. And so with everything else we'll share, this is a thing that encourages us to move towards influencers and content creator partnerships, but also to move away from something we're clinging on to for hope that just doesn't have that for us anymore like it once did. I'd say one way to think about this is, yes, so engagement was mentioned in the Menti I did as one of the what did I call it? One of the top metrics that we're measuring. I'm gonna beg to offend you in the next slide because I really don't like engagement. I wish. Let me hold my breath. So let me first show you the stats. So engagement is down across the board, right? So median, not average, median. You see 0.43. So TikTok is the most generous. And yet you find, if I asked you, is your brand on TikTok? No, not yet. We haven't, we don't have clearance, or that's a bit different, it's video. And I'm like, okay, right? But this is one of the places to explore and experiment with when we move out of the margin of safety. But I keep tweeting, I keep sharing X posts, I do a lot of LinkedIn, I do a lot of Facebook. And that's why we need to move a little bit away from that, because there is more to be gained here, but it takes a complete rethinking. In fact, I'd say that millennials, with the most respect and above, struggle the most with this shift towards perpetual video. And let me put it this way, Gen Z, as we saw from the data, have this sort of naturally hardwired or coded into them, and are some of the best advocates to help with ideas and insights for that. So, don't read the part that's crossed out, but I believe engagement is a vanity metric. Right? It's a safety blanket for us because it's easy to measure. And I say, I'm speaking now to brands. So I'll give an example. There's so many data points, but I'll just use one. So in this case, you take a chocolate brand. Now, the first thing we have to realize from a marketing effectiveness standpoint, that's one of the best types of audits you can do. There's a lot of marketing that gets wasted. In fact, you might know the quote by John Wanamaker, the American industrialist, who said that half of my marketing budget is wasted. The shame is I don't know which half, right? Which just says that there's actually, a lot of well-meaning brands that are essentially lighting their money on fire. And they don't even know that they're doing that. Why? Because there's charts, graphs, and numbers that give us a safety, give us a familiarity that it's working or something is there. And if the sales keep chugging along, then you can do it, but it doesn't mean it's the most effective, and certainly not in 2025. So from a marketing effectiveness perspective, the people you're always targeting are not the loyalists. They're actually who we call the non-buyers. The biggest biggest category for any brand are the people who haven't tried it once. If you wonder why Coke can be found in Mandera, Coca-Cola, I should say, can be found in, I beg your pardon, but in, or rather, a sweet, sugary, sweetened beverage that is fizzy can be found in all of these different places is because, one, they are physically available, so they've really dominated with that. But why they spend what they spend is now to be what they call mentally available. So they've worked out their math. There's a really great bit of marketing effectiveness called market mix modeling. It just starts to say, do I know what each channel from out of home to radio to TV, and mind you, TV and radio are having record-setting highs for reach. I have to tell you, like, sometimes when a digital conference, digital is everything. It's not, believe it or not. TV is actually underestimated. We've done some TV in the last year on behalf of clients, and we've also audited it as well, and it still delivers, especially for reach, and if you play it right, emotion. But the bottom line is, for what Coke is trying to do is get you to move from, let's call it 5.5 Coca-Colas a year to 7. And that's why they do the ads. That's why they time them. Because for them, they've worked it out. If you're a non-buyer, I just need to get you once. And literally, that's where my sales and profit will come from. It will not come from someone who's already consuming, let's say, a couple a week, consuming more. Because that's such a small subset of the base. But let's look at the people who like them on Facebook. It's the opposite. So the people who actually like them on Facebook are the loyalists. So they're sort of preaching only to the converted. And this is why engagement in many cases, if you are paying for engagement in 2025, the first thing Nendo tells you is stop. And you'd likely not lose as much as you think either. Because that's the start that gets us feeling comfortable, confident in ourselves, familiar, but it's not effective. What's more effective is reach. And you might not like what I've said, so I'll show you what the head of Instagram said, and other people, of course, just to show this. So you don't even want to just reach followers because they're already loyalists, they already pressed that button at some point or the other. You actually want to target the whole market because that's how you recruit non-buyers into light and light into moderate, and that's how sales and profit in marketing happens. So for me, engagement, if I could kill it, I would, but I know it's bread and butter for a lot of people. I know that this shift is a big shift, and this is why sometimes you need external audits as brands. And this is partly why influencers work as well as a channel. Why? They are not going to give you a subset of your followers. They give you greater likelihood of reaching more buyers, and that's why you spend the premium to engage them, because they can give you something that your own audience can't. But we need to make sure we're not targeting on talking to ourselves. We want to talk every time. Even if these numbers are not amazing for comments, likes or shares, never take discouragement with that. You want to reach as many people as possible as your number one objective. If you are what I call a challenger brand, meaning you're not number 1, 2, 3 in your industry, you have no choice but to follow what I'm saying if you have the desire to win at marketing with the spend that you have. Okay, said this, right? Be careful what you measure, and not everything that can be measured is meaningful. I don't know if you've heard of something called the Cobra effect. So the Cobra effect came from, I believe it's colonial times in India, where I forget the name, but there was at one point this aspect of a lot of cobras, right? So snakes around. And so the intention was, how do we reduce the cobra population? So what they did was, they had a bounty program. They said, you know what? We're going to actually reward you for every dead cobra you bring us. We'll pay you for that because that's going to reduce the number of cobras around. So guess what people did? It's not just enterprising Kenyans, ladies and gentlemen. They started breeding cobras with the sole purpose of killing them to go and claim the bounty. What's the moral of the story here? Even when you have a well-intentioned measure like engagement, Mark, you can't be telling me engagement is bad. It's bad. Right? And I say it's bad because it can be deceiving, especially with some of the other metrics that are really great for brands to track. And so sometimes what can happen is if you focus too much on the measure, which is something called Goodhart's law, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to become a good measure. And I know that's like a bit of a mouthful, but basically you have to be careful what you're measuring. Because I can tell you there's a lot of agencies that are incentivized for the wrong thing and then are paying to get that wrong thing because a certain leader inside has committed to a target. right? The worst offender, worst of all, it's probably even higher than engagement for me, is positive sentiment. You cannot pay Kenyans to say nice things about you. And Kenyans generally, since June through August of last year, are extremely cynical with brands. Don't fall for that trap to say, I need my positive engagement to be higher, right? Because you're just going to be throwing money in a bottomless pit of people who don't actually care about the brand. You'd rather go offline for your research. And that's why even for us, I don't want to be deceived by what I see with 1.3 million TikToks. I want to actually find by polling and doing brand lift studies. And that's what Nendo does. We try to bring some rigor and science behind the aspects of marketing to help people make smarter decisions. And so one of the most helpful ways that I think we can remind ourselves of this is, one, keep in mind that we're talking about only one of the 4 P's of marketing. We're talking a lot about promotion. But when we talk about price, you'd be surprised how many times there's marketing innovation to be done at the price level or the product level. I know the next panel will talk a little bit about this. And you know, we've seen Dairyland recently change up the packaging. Sometimes that's part of where you make gains, is actually getting smarter about the product itself. There's something called shrinkflation. No, you're not dreaming or hallucinating. That 3-ply toilet paper is now 2-ply, and they didn't tell you. That 1 liter is now 795 milliliters, and they didn't tell you the price is the same. That's what brands do in the back end sometimes to maintain their sales and profit and volumes. Sometimes a bit at your expense, but the point is there's a lot of more innovation that happens than we might give it credit for. So if we go back to promotion, how does advertising work? Well, it increases or maintains sales and margins. How? By increasing the chance that people will choose your brand, by making the brand easy to think of and easy to buy. This is one of the key things. Even with influencer marketing, the number of times we're sort of really hamstringing and putting influencers in a straitjacket for the content they create, it works against us. We need to allow a bit of freedom, or one of the best ways I encourage people to explore influencer marketing is say, which part of the customer journey do people get the most stuck in or have the biggest struggle? Give an influencer that as their creative problem and watch them go to work. And ask them to just achieve one message. Don't be like, we have 5 key propositions, you only covered 2. It's like, no, allow them a little bit of creativity there and see ways that they can actually work for you a bit better. Now, this is not the end. It's, so making the brand easy to think of. So that's mental availability, then easy to buy. The way you do mental availability is through something we call distinctive assets. Easy to buy is often through physical availability, distribution, picking up your phone when leads come your way. And then lastly, ideally, you're not just doing this through the rational part of the brain. You're doing this through creating what we call positive feelings and associations. And now you see reach again through broad reach ads that people find interesting and enjoyable. That's another place that influencer marketing and content creators come in. You don't want them, again, playing it too tight, reading off of a really tight script. You want to give them freedom to have people at least find it interesting. Let me tell you, the worst crime in marketing is when you are instantly forgettable. Oh boy, if I had a coin for every time I see content and I'm like, wow, this is great. It's been through 3 dozen hands and checked every box, and people are going to swipe right past it, right? And that's one of the challenges, right? Is how do we stay interesting or enjoyable? Not everything will be this, but that's why we talked about cutting your content calendar down and not feeling like you have to be on this never-ending treadmill of posting, because for brands, we need to find partnerships and even deploy some of those resources towards ways we can work with thought leaders and others as well. Lastly, targeted activation is how you build. So if you've built an emotional connection, right? Positive feelings and associations. And brands can do this without influencers. Please know that, right? This is not an influencer thing. I'm obviously here at an influencer themed day. But this here doesn't actually care what channel you use. This is strictly a way of thinking from sort of 2 maestros in marketing effectiveness, Les Binet and Peter Field. And I think the credit goes to Adam and Eve DDB, a London-based agency where Les Binet used to work. But this here for me is such a great way to think of this, because you have to think of the distribution, how easy it is for people to act on that. And there's 2 kinds of content you're creating. You're starting with broad reach, which is more emotional based. So Don't worry about the call to action. Just focus on this part. And then activation. That's how you capitalize on that. And again, influencers can do both, but I tend to find that Kenyan influencers, from the audits we've done, from the campaigns we've run, they do a lot better here than here. There are some platforms now in the social commerce space that do an amazing job here. When I hear the numbers in e-commerce, I think it's gross merchandise value, GMV, that they're doing, it's double-digit millions of shillings every month. And it's fascinating to me that it's influencers driving that, then influencers actually reaping from the affiliate fees and actually getting residual money off of not just doing the awareness, but actually closing on that too. So, moral of the story, engagement or organic reach is going down. That should scare us, that should alarm us, but it's been the case for years. TikTok is the dark horse in that its numbers, even though they are going down too, are so much bigger than anywhere else. So if you did want to do something organic, even if you end up in what people call 200 view jail, 200 views is not small potatoes. Like, that's decent. But that's a bad day on TikTok for some, right? So that's still something to consider, even though it's video. Like I said, get some of those Gen Zs around you to advise, counsel, and direct it. And you might be surprised. Even people in departments that you don't expect, if you're on the agency side, can help with this. All right, so hopefully some good news now. What should we do next? If we're not focused on followers, right? Okay, Mark, you've flogged the engagement horse dead. Well, for me, it becomes more about moving from followers here towards what we call viewers. This is what you should focus more on. This aspect of reach, especially when you're paying, pay for reach. Now, that's one button. You can spam that button every time on a marketing campaign. If you're focused on reach, I'm not saying you can't go wrong, because obviously you could take somewhat forgettable content and just expose it to millions of people. But even then, that's a better strategy than exposing it only to your audience or your followers. But what For You pages, and there's For You pages everywhere now, what they've done is move us towards viewers. There's many people who don't even follow a particular creator, but your For You page on X, on Instagram, there's search or explore tab, wherever it may be, or For You on TikTok, is bringing them to you every now and again. And you haven't even felt compelled to follow them. You might save something every now and again, but that's the shift, is that if we're still obsessing around this, and woe unto us if we're paying for this, I don't think this is the move. This is a bit more of the move. Let the followers take care of themselves as people feel they want to hear more from you. So, if Mark Kaigwa was like the bearer of bad news, here's Adam Mosseri, where he says, we're making an update within Insights to make views the primary metric for reels, stories, photos, and carousels. Right, so you've heard it here. For the number one platform, everyone in this room rated is the most important. I will say, though, in terms of size, I'm always fascinated how we over-index on two platforms. So we over-index on Instagram. Maybe it's because of us here, right? And we over-index on what I'd call Twitter or X. Now, the biggest ones, there's only 3 platforms that have north of 10 million monthly active users in Kenya. Anyone want to take any guesses? Facebook, yes, Facebook. In fact, Facebook's biggest audience is 18 to 24. Does anyone know why it's 18 to 24? Because you might be like, but Mark, I've not posted on there in like a year. Like, nobody can be on Facebook. I hear you. Why is it 18 to 24-year-olds? Does anyone know? Just shout, said, you look like you're whispering. Yes, it's because there's something called free Facebook, actually. And if you need free bundles every day, right, that's one of the platforms you'll use. But for some of us in this room, we haven't thought about that. Because when your bundles run out, you just buy new ones. You don't even think it's, data is like breathing to you, right? You haven't even joined the Wi-Fi here because you're like, no, I got bundles. No, don't worry about me, Mark. Security, cyber security, you know me. And I'm like, okay, I hear you. But there are tens of millions, right, of Kenyans who need Facebook as a lifeline for the free version, right? So that's 17 million Kenyans there. Second platform that has more than 10 million. Take a guess. TikTok. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll talk about it. Third one. Instagram. No, actually. In fact, Instagram is 10. YouTube, correct. YouTube, 11 million. So those are the only 3. That's it. That's where the list ends, those three. Okay, so that's something for us to think about. In fact, I would put it to you this way. Facebook is 5 times the size of Instagram in Kenya. And yet, if I show you how much money brands are spending on Instagram content creators and that ecosystem, it doesn't match, particularly when you start looking at reach. Now, I'm not telling you not to do something or to do something. I'm just a data guy, right? Don't shoot the messenger, okay? But I tell you that because when we come to the data table, right, we suspend judgment. We let, the data do the talking, or we, in some cases, torture the data until it speaks. So one way to think of this, in my opinion, is if you think about, let me just contrast TikTok and Instagram a bit. So this is a bit of a mix that says, look, there's some very niche content. I won't lie, TikTok is like, I could do a whole day on TikTok, from vernacular TikTok and what we've seen there in comedy, politics, culture, sports, generational divides, a lot more, down to there's a lot we could say on it. But for purposes of this, a lot of times our fear is, man, you know what? Like, I'll only be seen by a small niche audience, right? And we wonder, how does content reach what we call the maximum threshold, where you go from I haven't seen it to, oh my gosh, this is so funny, you've seen that too? And I've seen this already, right? It's basically hitting its ceiling. I'd say when we move away from audiences, like I said, followers, towards interests. We were in a meeting with a client a couple of weeks ago, and they said, I want to use my own hashtag so that it's me talking to me and sort of my people and audience. And I said, that's okay, but I would encourage us to consider the global or the biggest and widest interest area and make it less about us. And there's fears there, but how will I track it? And am I making a difference? Yes, you are. Right? The further you're moving away from what's safe and familiar and has worked the last few years because of how many changes there's been in the algorithm and more, towards interest areas and your potential audience, right? As we said, the better for you in terms of effectiveness. In fact, I'd put the sweet spot just here. It's far enough away from your hub of safety. And this, honestly, not all your content will actually reach here, but aiming for this, even with your influencer and creator partnerships, is massive. Now, one of the reasons that this is something to think about is what we call zero-click marketing. I won't spend much time here because I know that I'm going to be hounded off this stage soon. But one of the things that's interesting is, and this is one of Nendo's 3 big trends of the year. So again, we can spend a whole day here because this is supposed to break the brains, the budgets, and also the tactics of what agencies have been doing the last decade. And if you're late to this, I think there's a lot of wasted resources that go into this if you don't change and adjust. So if you search for something on your phone now, particularly on Google, whose job it is, let's just think of this. Their job is to make money when you click on something. And they give you something called an AI overview now. You don't even click on the ad that's right underneath it because you got the answer you wanted. Am I right? They are trying to sort of change themselves. For the first time in their, I think, 30-year plus history, they've disclosed how many trillion searches people make around the world. Why? Because people are like, oh my gosh, everyone's going to AI and ChatGPT. But the point of that is that there's now this battle going on where even they are trying to disrupt themselves. So if you're trying to get people to click on links in the year of our Lord, 2025, it doesn't work the same way as before. That's my big challenge. And that's why we focus on being interesting, enjoyable, and leave people to search and find you the other way. Or yes, the links are there, but don't take it the wrong way. If people, essentially when they click, it's an accidental click in some cases, right? It's not an intentional one, but they will find you and they will seek you out at the appropriate time. And almost every other platform here is now putting people in a position where you can benefit from not trying to lead people out. Meaning, don't put that link, keep people inside. You're doing something on Twitter, make it a thread, not a link out. In fact, your organic reach will do better when you try not to get people out. And like I said, even with somewhere like Facebook, where people are using free Facebook, they don't want to open their browser where the meter will start running for their megabytes, right? So just something here where we don't want to eat dust this year, at least not if we expect to use the budgets the right way. And it's something, again, because the data tends to challenge us a bit. I'll speed it up a bit. The one thing with TikTok you should know, it's on all of these platforms. It's the only one like that. So I think that's something for us just to think about, and that's supposed to compel us, because when we're looking at TikTok, there's a few things we need to know as I start flying like the wind a little bit here. So what are the 5 pillars of TikTok? At least according to Nendo, dance. That one is not going anywhere. The number of Kenyans who can dance, I don't know, the net dance, like, net economic dance, whatever, metric, the GDP of dance and motion of the waist, knees, and below, right, has moved at exponential levels over the last few years. I feel like a weatherman pointing out to you that it's about to be raining. Food, don't need to tell you about this gentleman called Dennis Ambachi. Beauty and fashion, massive. For the guys, please, if you see a lady, just come meet me behind the pull-up banner over here. Sometimes when a lady's putting on makeup like this and talking, you want to listen. She could be putting you on some real game. So don't just swipe up, my guys. Comedy, obviously huge. And then family life. What we've been saying for a few years, I'm speeding up now. Kienyeji talk, Jabba talk, Ngulusumu, Twitter, whatever. There's a whole new set of content creators. I don't like the term Kienyeji talk personally. If you've read our reports, you know why. We did the whole oral history of where vienyeji versus broiler came from, why it's messy, why people should not call other people vienyejis, even if you mean it as a term of endearment. But the point of this is, even if you look at Sheng alone, there's so much to be found, and TikTok is the game-changing space. This guy, Kelvin, who used to work as a watchman, this guy's been featured on US media, my people, way before any Kenyan media put him on TV. He was on TV in the United States of America. Okay, so I say that because if you play the algorithm right, there's so many things that can happen for you, right? You might know Tony Mpole here, right? He helps you budget with 50 shillings, 20 shillings, 10 shillings. I'm seeing a lot of smiles. If you don't know this lovely gentleman, get to know him. He's a fascinating guy. He's doing hundreds of thousands of views in a kiosk, probably the size of, like this, and he is being asked to travel out, the equivalent of flying somebody out. He's moving around to meet other small businesses, engage them, and yet guess what? He might not appear on any of your lists of the creators that I believe my audience connects with and speaks to, right? And why? Because sometimes we're not as objective, right? And so how many Tony Mpoles are there? There's, I want to say, tens of thousands of like what I'd call these mid-tier creators. They're not on Wowzy necessarily. They're not on Twitter. They might not even be on, other platforms. And I just say that because they might not know I got to go to a platform, do the handshake with my data, and yet they're there talking to your audience frequently. Vernacular as well, that's also slept on or really overlooked. And one of my, as I look to the back again and speed up even faster, one of the examples I like to give, this data is a bit old, but this is Minnie Cheps. You might know her. She's based out in sort of the Rift Valley, Eldoret area. She's a visual artist that does very cool compositions where she's the size of a spoon or a pea or is floating up in the air and coming down. She does some very cool stuff. What you're seeing here is 40 million views in less than a month. 40 million with an M. Nobody, no musician, no artist. For this period when we were tracking as Nendo, no one was doing numbers like this. Like no one was in the same galaxy as her. And she's not alone. That's the point. Is she might be overlooked, she might be undermined, she might be underestimated, she's certainly undervalued, but that doesn't mean that she's not killing it. And yet the brands here say that we're objective, we make the right choice, we love the data. We love to change our minds from time to time. So the point here is there are creators, especially when you think of that Gen Z stat that I shared. Okay, gonna bounce around a little bit here. I'm going to share just a couple things about Facebook that still worry me. Don't worry about the slides, guys. I'll make the same points. I just might not walk through slide by slide. So one, even the definition of an influencer, there's guys who now have learned Grok, they've learned all these visual AI. There's types of case studies that we have at Nendo that I did not feel safe to show here because, a Japanese station wagon vehicle with a dark color, typically descending down Kiambu Road, might be awaiting me if I finish. But what we tend to see is that the AI, even as part of protest, aura for aura or otherwise, this stuff, even my own Shosho, bless her heart, I think we're like, look, some of us are like, you know what, we're going to lose her to all the AI generated video and everything, but we're going to draw a line at health stuff. Shosho, no, we're not buying Moringa because it does this, that, and the other. That one will stop there. But if you believe the fires in Los Angeles are part of a larger, judgment from the Lord, and there was a video, and you should have seen how the fire came up instead of down, I'd be like, you know what, Shosh, Where's the little, heart emoji? And let's exchange a bit of ideas on that. Why? Because even just FB right now, and not just here, if you see what's happening in India, there's guys selling content playbooks on how to create AI content and do insane numbers using whatever's working on Facebook. So we say influencer because sometimes we expect a ring light and really, polished, well-edited content. But right now, it's anyone, everyone, even a public official saying that in Kendu Bay, clouds shaped in the form of Jesus Christ were seen with a reflection in the mud, not a real image. So I think we tend to underestimate how influential TikTok is. And our case studies of the protests last year just showed a real difference. Since then, I think this is one of the more interesting underlying things we can talk about, how to create content for TikTok with content creators and yourself as a brand so that you get searched for in there and are found. And that's a story for another day. Even something like this for lunch, right? People want to go somewhere for lunch. I was once with a client who flew in from overseas, and they looked at TikTok to see what to wear here. I was like, wow. I was like, even I don't look at TikTok, like that. But even the guys at Google, as far back as 2022, said they know people aren't even checking maps the same way or search. They're checking TikTok. And to some extent, maybe Instagram as well. There are people who search Instagram the same way. What are young people saying when you look at verbatims from focus groups and otherwise? They're saying TikTok's less biased, right? To Google and other platforms. There's even a whole category of content creator who are now turning the camera back on their grandparents. Octogenarians, I think is the term. And they're speaking in vernacular and they're building hundreds of thousands of views. Again, because young people sometimes in the city don't have that connection. You've got blended families. You have just a disconnection of, we're downtown, we're here now, we're dispersed all over the country, and they're turning to, Shosho Agikadu and others who, they're basically, this is the person I can connect with and get that little feeling maybe of someone that's no longer with us anymore. So, yeah, this is what TikTok says on their business site. And one of my favorite slides from Matt Stanoff is TikTok videos are ads, all of them. And so you can use it that way. And don't feel any pressure to make it do anything. You're just learning and trying to ride the wave. And that's the biggest encouragement I have. If my team were here, they would have cold sweats because I use this slide with a lot of force, like a blunt object with my team. If you don't hook someone in the first 3 seconds, we are so past the boy meets girl, boy falls in love, girl dumps boy, boy gets slapped, boy goes through it, and guess what? In the end, he gets the girl. We don't have time for that. Show me the slap in the first 3 seconds, and I'm sticking around. And you'd be so surprised how many big brands get this wrong. Like, even if you look at their best performing content, you're like, you're leaving something here on the table. So there's so much, again, I could say about this, but I know that I'm running out of time. So I want to leave you with things that you can do to think about marketing effectiveness with influencers. So let me leave you with some thoughts on that. So first thing is video. Video. The best explanation to Nendo's understanding of why TikTok is as big as it is one, its algorithm is very egalitarian, meaning it just could shine on you. Mimi niko na nyota ya algorithm, like they just put videos and I just get like views, right? I say that because it's true. So if you're looking for what's going to work for you and move people emotionally, video is almost always going to be there. That's why, for me, this is a great way to continue to collaborate with influencers and for more brands to move to video, even if it means, again, halving your content calendar. And video tends to get better reach than next to anything else. TV still works. I hate to say it, right? Digital guy at a digital conference saying TV works. It works. It's effective. When we run the numbers, your cost, relative to reach, depending on which station you choose, it's hard to fight the science, guys. TV still works. So what do we want to do for 2025 for brands and influencers? Emotion first, right? You always want to lead with that. Secondly, reach, optimize reach across all channels, paid and organic if you must. Inform people. I mean, this is just like, we had dozens of examples. There's one where I think we were thinking about how you go about informing people, even in very regulated sectors. And then you have conversion. And people sometimes put conversion first. And I get that, and I struggle with that. And there are ways to try to optimize for that. But like I said, with zero click, you have to change things a bit. Now, This was a slide that I added when Sed was asked, how do you track this? So brand lift studies, honestly, just engage a research firm. It doesn't have to be Nendo, it can be someone else. There's so many ways to build your case as a marketer for what's working. And it's not just necessarily the charts and graphs. It's actually certain types of studies you can do 6 months, once a year, that help in many ways to equip you with more ammo. Now, I'm getting into the plane is coming to land. What do you see here? Just shout out to me what you see. There's no wrong answer. Who said, white and? White and black dots. A pattern. Keep going. Black and white. Circles, yes. Keep going. Rows and columns, yes. So, again, there's no wrong answer, boys and girls. These are 36 circles. There's some that are black, there's some that are gray or white if you like, but that's it, there's 36 of them. But what our eyes do when we see this is we assign a meaning to this. So some of you will say, oh, there were like 3 sets of black ones. Or they were like, they were going this way and they were going this way. That's part of what we do naturally. One of the biggest challenges that we try to encourage clients is that people are not generally looking to switch. So if we talk about behavior change a bit, and that's a bit of what Nendo does nowadays, you'd be surprised how confident people are that customers will switch. Our habits are pretty hard to shake. So even if we switch, sometimes we come back, but we are creatures of habit, right? So you have your usual brand, and everyone here could be doing pretty interesting stuff, and someone on sale, I might consider them. But getting people to switch is why you cannot strictly appeal to people rationally with features and benefits. It's why you're trying to at least be interesting or enjoyable, or what I said, make an emotional connection. So let's run the math here like if we were like a brand. So if you add your brand here, right? You're the 20th ad, right? Among a sea of 20 other brands, let's assume, or 20 other ads. So if we do the math of how share of voice works, you would have 5%. So you're in what Nendo calls a sea of sameness, right? Stock image, a logo on the bottom right, caption, 6 client hashtags, another day at the office, which people, quickly swipe past and instantly forget. So the challenge here is, how do we break out of this, right? What do we do differently if we want to still occupy this space, but change it? The aspect is at least trying to be what other people call meaningfully different or distinctive, or what we might just call if everyone is zigging, zag. That's part of why you do marketing effectiveness studies and all. You don't want to be the same as everyone else, especially if you don't share budgets with everyone else. And what's the benefit of this? Because this is why you should let influencers take risks. You should let them actually push against the boundaries of your brand. You should explore vernacular as a multinational brand. You should explore Swahili or Sheng, even the Sheng you don't understand. Because the point is not to fall into the sea of sameness. So if you do share of mind, there's your ad or your bit of content or asset, and there's everyone else. And if you're distinctive, then technically, again, you're one of 20, that hasn't changed, but your mind share, the fact that people actually are remembering you and able to share it, spread it, say it, that's one of the biggest reasons marketers exist in the first place. And so that's my presentation, ladies and gentlemen. In a nutshell, is that for us, from a mindset point of view, from the data, there's a couple mindsets we need to shed. There's a couple metrics that are not as meaningful. But for us, if we pursue reach and we pursue partnerships that take us from instantly forgettable to at least memorable and standing out, you could get double-digit returns on marketing investment, especially with influencers, by letting this partnership and collaboration happen. So we've gone through the trends. That's how it typically works. There's a lot more that you could do, through obviously the Verge team, through Nendo. We all play nice together. And yes, please never stop sharing, saving, watching, reading, listening passionately about the things you love. So thank you very much, and thanks for having me.